again. I'm Daniel Ward here with Kevin Jones, and we're giving you the deck of the week. This week, whoa, wait for it.
Grixis Death Shadow.
So, as we always have a cool little picture on here, thanks Tony for that, it kind of looks like you and me.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
It's like you in a Magic tournament, lost looking for Red Bull, and then me, just like, I just lost round 3, and I'm just like, where is everyone?
That's right. This is very similar. The Death Shadow having like this giant Cthulhu type head thing, I didn't even realize it. I didn't really understand what the art of Death Shadow was until I'm seeing it right now.
Oh, it's sweet.
It's so cool. The art is really cool.
So we decided to do Grixis Death Shadow this week because Brad Nelson won the SCG Baltimore Open with this deck. It's one of the most, if not the #1 deck in Modern right now, so we thought like it's a good time.
Won Grand Prix Copenhagen, right?
Yeah.
With the same deck.
Yeah.
Mattia!
So we're gonna give you a little rundown for you. Boom! I love this little boom. It's like a transformer type thing, right?
Yeah. It's a cool fade in. I like it.
All right, so here we got a couple of the creatures of the deck. The mainstay, Death Shadow. And what do you think about this card?
I mean, it's obviously a very powerful card. It makes decks built so strangely because the format is generally, like, Magic is generally a thing where, like, losing life is bad.
Yeah.
Like, it's a drawback for a lot of cards. A lot of cards are powerful, on what they do versus the mana that they cost, and then they tack on some life loss to make the card more fair. Sure. Like Painful Truths. If it was just draw 3 for 3 mana, that would be unfair.
Yeah.
But you lose, but you lose life, so it mitigates that a little bit. It makes it so that the card might be really good in some matchups, but not so great in others, and so on and so on. But Death Shadow here makes like those cards that have drawbacks, like, better almost. Like Thoughtseize, Fetch, Shock, Thoughtseize, putting you at 15 on turn 1 would generally be like rough.
Yeah.
Like your mid-range deck would have given up a couple cards on a deck that's trying to kill you. But in this case, it's like the opposite. Like Fetch, Shock, Thoughtseize on turn 1, and then Fetch, Shock on turn 2. You have a Death Shadow on turn 2, and then any extra Street Wraiths or secondary Thoughtseizes or whatever, and you just have a 5/5 on turn 2.
Yeah, that's kind of like what you're getting into is like basically like the card is just for its mana efficiency for 1 black and doing stuff that's a lot differently, like you talked about, losing life just so fast. You can have like the draws where you have, like you said, the Fetch, Shock, Thoughtseize, and then next turn fetching, and you have like 2, depending on your Street Wraith draw, but you could surprise them. You can have 2 3/3s, 2 5/5s on turn 2.
It's crazy.
It's like super fast.
And then Street Wraith also facilitates that. Cycling pay 2 life is what you do most of the time with this card. Card is very good for getting out early Death Shadows. It's very good with your Serum Visions as allowing you to draw the card you need right away when it's something like Fatal Push or Tassiger and you have 5 cards in your graveyard and so on and so on. Death Shadow even. Makes Serum Visions much better in that you can get the card if you need it right away, you can get the card that turn.
Attacking a Lily.
Yeah, it also, like, there's no rules on when you cast it. Like, it just says, all you have to do to cycle, or not to cast it, when you cycle it, sorry. When you cycle it, all you have to do is pay 2 life.
So you have to have 2 life to pay.
Whenever you want. And so people are just, there's like only one time within this long range of whenever you want that is correct.
Yeah.
Technically. So like a lot of people are going to do this wrong. A lot of people are going to play this card like Gitaxian Probe. They're just going to look at their hand and they're going to go, okay, this hand's okay. Cycle. All right, now I know how I'm going to play this game.
Yeah.
And then some people are going to hold it and use it like a Mutagenic Growth or, added damage to them or a pump to their Death Shadow. And some people will like save it until they use their Serum Visions and then know when to, like, they can grab something right away. There's a lot of different ways to cast the card.
Yeah, there's a lot of play with this card. I think the first one more times than not you're going to cycle it right away. But definitely the second or third one, and I've seen a lot of players have the Death Shadow, especially against a deck like Burn, and keep it at a 3/3 to try to bait a Searing Blaze or a Lightning Bolt, and then being able to Street Wraith in response, and it's just a total blowout.
Searing Blaze would just live though.
Yeah,
right?
it would hit you for 3, but I mean you're still getting their turn to do 2 mana.
Yeah.
Because they think that's going to resolve
No,
rather
I
than
know.
an Eidolon.
But I think that the weirdness of Death Shadow, and this doesn't really matter to this specifically, but the weirdness of Death Shadow is that like if they Searing Blaze a 3/3 Death Shadow, it's just a 6/6 before this spell resolves.
Because the damage hits them first.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
kind of
that's
interesting.
that's very interesting.
It can matter in
I think that would.
sometimes.
It's kind of like the rule with Tarmogoyf with an instant. Like,
Yeah.
you hit them with the lightning
Bolt
bolt.
your
the
2/3
instant's
Tarmogoyf.
there,
Well,
and it survives.
guess what happened, man?
Yeah. So mainly what Street Wraith we just want to talk about is, yes, you're going to cycle a lot of times, but it does have a lot of flexibility.
I would imagine that when I play this deck, I'm going to cycle like never. I'm just going to like figure out when I need it and cycle with like Searing Visions and stuff.
Yeah, it's also one of those cards too, that replaces, people talk about 56 card decks.
Yeah.
And when you put this with Probe in other decks, it's like you're going to have the draws where you look at your opening hand and you have like 2 of these in your hand, and now you really have to like look at what else is in your hand because you're just putting yourself at like a greater chance of variance.
And you have no idea what your hand actually is. If you have 2 Street Wraiths, you don't know if your hand is good or if it's like a 5-lander or whatever.
Exactly.
Which is also interesting. It adds to like some of the variance in these decks, but like these decks are generally super consistent because so many replacement effects just makes it like a good thing. Like a 52 card deck is going to be more consistent than a 60 card deck. So overall, I think it's a good thing for the deck.
Last guy on here, Snapcaster Mage, kind of totally different from what the first 2 were trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, Snapcaster Mage is kind of totally different than the first iteration of Death Shadow decks we've seen. We saw like the aggressive Sam Black one with like Monastery with just shadows in it that killed quickly, and like a couple like battle rages and stuff. This is just like Grixis controller, Grixis Delver with shadows instead of Delvers or whatever you want to call it.
It's ready to grind.
Yeah, it's ready to grind, and Snapcaster Mage is so good against other decks that are trying to do a similar thing to what your deck is doing, because it just adds another Fatal Push, or it adds another Stubborn Denial, or it adds another Thought Scour, and just like, it's just whatever you need at that exact moment. And then later on, obviously, Kolaghan's command loops are super powerful, and the fact that you can flashback sideboard cards just means that you're almost always going to you're never going to side out Snapcaster. It's great.
Yeah. All right. Last creatures in the deck, we've got 2 Tasker the Golden Fang and 2 Gurmag Angler. Big delve threats, cards that you usually want to play for 1 or 2 mana, but you wouldn't know that by its casting cost.
Yeah, well, they certainly cost at a base level, and that's not really what this show is about right now. But that said, we've seen a lot of decks like Grixis Control, Grixis Delver decks playing 3 Tassiger, 1 Gurmag Angler. But here we see a 2-2 split, and that's most likely because between having a full 12 fetch lands, having Street Wraiths, and having 6 discard spells in addition to 4 Thought Scours, you're much more likely to be able to have a lot of cards in your graveyard early on.
Sure.
And you're also less likely with a lower land count and like a super high velocity efficient deck that plays a lot of 1-mana threats.
All right, so Golden Fang, a little bit more diverse than Angler. We're just putting a big 5/5 fatty. Tasker is better for the long game, and also there's just like the sequences like you talk about. We're playing it on turn 2, that 1 extra card might not be in your graveyard, so I don't mind the 2-2 split. I think it's fine.
If you draw 1 Delve creature, you probably want to draw a Tassiger because, again, it has a little bit of more added implications. They're both big enough to turn on Stubborn Denial. This one's easier to cast and then leave something behind for Snapcaster Mage. And if the game grinds out, you can use its other ability.
Yeah.
However, the fact that you can cast 2 Delve spells over the first 4 to 5 turns in this deck means that having the 2-2 split is really good because you never want both of the ones you draw to be a Tassiger.
Correct.
Because you can actually cast both of them.
Yeah.
So the second one being an Angler. Sometimes you'll cast a Tassiger on turn 2, you won't even exhaust your entire graveyard, or you'll exhaust most of it, and then on turn 4 or turn 3, you'll just tap out completely and play a Gurmag Angler. Delve away like 3 cards or whatever.
Yeah. All right.
See that happen sometimes. But yeah, moving to the removal suite, we've got 2 Terminate, which is obviously kills everything. They don't regenerate. It's great.
On the slide with the Terminates, we have Fatal Push and Lightning Bolt. Fatal Push, just 1 mana, the best removal spell for this deck, just based off of the fact that it's staying low to the ground, staying 1 mana. But like you said with Terminate, probably the second or third best removal spell for creatures in the format, based off of its versatility.
I think
It
that
just literally hits almost everything.
regenerate is pretty irrelevant most of the time.
Agreed.
The extra red in the cost is fine as you are aggressively fetching and shocking yourself. However, the one thing is that like the red can make you weak to Master of Waves sometimes. But 4 Fatal Push and 12 fetch lands, usually you can get Master of Waves.
Yeah, you should be in a good position, especially after Sideboard, I think. It's a card where you're still going to have Terminate in your deck because you still want to pick off the Lords. Mm-hmm. So versus that specific one, I don't think it's a matter. But
if you find a deck where you're going to be like incentivized to fetch like Watery Grave into basic Swamp a lot, then maybe you could look at Go for the Throat in the Terminate slot.
Okay.
But there's enough artifacts between like Worm Coils from Tron, Affinity and stuff that like I think Terminate is still better than Go for the Throat.
Yeah, I also think it's a really big concession Brad made for the mirror match because you know Fatal Push and Lightning Bolt, none of them kill the Delve spells we just talked about. And so with having Terminates and Snapcasters, you're going to be able to kill some of those. One Lightning Bolt, huh? That's weird. We haven't seen that in a while.
Brad said he might have wanted the second one going forward. I think it's important that it goes upstairs. I think bolting yourself is a little overrated.
I agree, but I like you being able to do that like
sure.
a Street Wraith.
I think the way when you bolt yourself is like when they're blocking.
Yeah.
And like it's generally like your deck is good when they're blocking, but overall I think it's nice to have the flexibility. Also, it kills Planeswalkers, which is sweet.
Yeah, especially in the mirror.
Liliana
is very important.
Is a pain.
Yeah, it's very important. All right.
That's it for the removal suite, and then this is like the card selection,
manipulation,
card advantage, whatever you want to call it, for the Kolaghan's command, and then the card selection right there out of Serum Visions and Thought Scour. You could even argue that Thought Scour is a bit card advantage as well because of the Delve mechanic and allowing you to cast cards for cheap or drawing you cards, quote unquote, with Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of value there. A little bit subtle of built-in value, but still a lot of value. 4 Serum Visions and 4 Thought Scour. Pretty much the backbone of the blue mid-range decks in Modern. The blue-black mid-range decks in Modern, rather.
Sure.
The blue-white ones usually don't play Thought Scour because the Delve mechanic
it's just for
facilitates the Delve creatures. Yeah. You have Delve creatures, you usually have Thought Scour. So yeah, so this is pretty standard. And then Serum Visions, like we said earlier, is made a little bit better by Street Wraith, allowing you to grab the card right away. You can do the same with Thought Scour if you have an excess of mana. You can Thought Scour them, draw the card right away.
Okay.
Comes up pretty rarely, but sometimes you're a little bit behind and you need to find a fatal find it. Thought Scour you, draw the fatal push your creature, stay alive, etc., etc.
Gotcha.
Stuff happens pretty often. And then 2 Kolaghan's commands, one of the best cards for Grixis strategies, and this deck is going to operate as a Grixis mid-range Delver control type deck some percentage of the time.
Okay.
And in those games, you win the game with Kolaghan's command loops. You win the game by Snapcaster K command, get back Snapcaster, blah, 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 blah. And then you go and you do that over and over and over and just grind your opponent into dust. And if your tempo-y, combo control-y, whatever you want to call it, Death Shadow plan doesn't work out, then you have Kolaghan's command to fall back on.
Yeah,
and that's a nice thing to have.
It's definitely, like, in my opinion, the Swiss Army knife in this deck. It just, like you said, it fills a lot of roles. The flexibility with this card is really endless. We could sit here and talk about, hundreds of scenarios where you're going to be able to, based off of what deck you're playing against, utilize this card. And those of you that did watch the coverage would, see how many different uses there are. And the one thing I do like about this as well, this deck isn't as cold to cards like Chalice, but like artifacts that people may have, whether it's Ensnaring Bridge, Chalice of the Void, things that make it kind of hard to operate the way it wants to, this just deals with that, and I like that.
Yeah, it's just gravy though, basically, right? Like you just
it's
playing
extra.
this card because of the regrowth, because you can randomly get them to discard a card, and because of the utility of the 2 damage, and the artifacts are great too, and makes the card so much better when sideboard games slow down. Also gives you a lot of game 1 utility against Affinity. Like the best part about this card is just like that it just does 2 awesome things.
Yeah.
And like the fact that you can shatter an Ensnaring Bridge or a Chalice is like super tangential, but like does happen.
Yeah.
Because Modern is super wide open, so like you need to have a plan for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And K command does that.
All right, next slide we got here some disruption. We're talking about 3 1-mana spells, 2 sorceries, 1 instance. We got some hand destruction with Thoughtseize and Inquisition, and 2 Stubborn Denial in the main. So a little bit of some counter spells. Once we take the board, we want to control it.
Yeah. This like how are they allowed to have discard spells and counter spells? It's so unfair, right?
Welcome to Modern.
Exactly. But so you might see other mid-range black decks in Modern go with like a 4-2 split in the other direction.
Sure.
Or just be playing more Inquisitions in general, because their life total, the life loss is seen as a detriment. It's a resource that they're trying to keep relatively high so that they can play their expensive cards throughout the mid-game and the late game like a traditional mid-range deck would.
Yeah.
Like an old-school Jund deck or what have you. But here, the life loss is a benefit and is often essential to getting your early Death Shadows and to having your deck flow the way it's supposed to in the early turns. So like 4 Thoughtseize is like the backbone of this deck once you're playing a Death Shadow deck. It's like absolutely essential that you play 4 Thoughtseize, and also it helps that it can get the wide range of things, all the way up the curve, Scape Shift, Primeval Titan, on and on and on. What else? Tron creatures.
It just helps you versus the non-fair decks, right?
Yeah.
It gives you enough time.
It also just like some people play expensive things and they try to play them like relatively quickly. You can call that fair or not, whatever you want to call Ban Eldrazi or Eldrazi Tron. There's somewhere in the realm of both.
Okay.
And then you've got actual combo decks, like you said, unfair decks like Ad Nauseam, Scape Shift, decks with Cryptic Command. Thoughtseize is great against those too.
Oh yeah.
You don't really have to do a lecture on why Thoughtseize is good. Most people watching this probably understand it.
Yeah.
And then the Inquisitions just snipe removal spells a lot of the time. Snapcasters before they can use them in the mirror match. Supplemental things for combo decks, the Lotus Blooms, the Angel's Graces out of Ad Nauseam, or
just being able to take their best card too.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 when you see their opening hand. That's the basis for this deck. Just kind of like, I'm going to disrupt you, I'm going to put a big fatty on the table, and if you kill that, I'm going to be redundant and keep doing that, and have a little bit of disruption here to just stop you from, moving your plan forward.
This deck is like a tempo deck through and through. It's like an old Rug Delver deck would have been or something, in that you take some, or you like disrupt them a little bit, and then you stick one threat, and then you interact, and you just ride out your one threat. Like most games I saw people playing with this deck, between Baltimore and the coverage I watched, they were Stick Tasker, Death Shadow, or Angler. And then after having interacted early, they would keep up Stubborn Denial or removal spells. And they would just tack, go, sometimes play land. And just like you would with a Flip Delver of Secrets or a Nimble Mongoose or whatever. And that was just the way the deck played. And Stubborn Denial, I think, is super good at beating up on the early decks. As well as like something like Collected Company, even like Cranial Plating. Like you get discard spells in the mirror, removal spells. As like your threats are pretty hard to deal with. Like outside of Fatal Push reliably killing Death Shadow and Terminate reliably killing everything in your deck, or go for throw killing everything in your deck. Like it's just pretty obvious that like 4/5s, 5/5s, and like 1 mana 7/7s or whatever Death Shadow is are just like hard to deal with on the abstract. And Stubborn Denial makes them punished for having multiple, or they need to draw multiple copies of like removal spells, and they're already like the range of the removal spells that are applicable to like your threats, because they're pretty resilient, is like already narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. Plus you're making them discard stuff, and Stubborn Denial is just like, all right, they like everything worked out for them somehow, and they found like the Terminate, and then it just gets either force spiked or hard countered, and they just die anyway. It's just like, sweet. This deck is really sweet. Stubborn Denial really good here.
Yeah, I like Stubborn Denial a lot. All right, let's get to some of how we're casting these spells. Let's get to the mana. So you mentioned it early. We have a lot of fetch lands.
The full 12 fetch lands in the wedge shard. I guess it's a shard, right?
Yeah, Grix.
Grixis is a shard. But yeah, so as you can see, we're balling on a budget like Daddy here, and we got 4 Scalding Tarn that are not expeditions, and then we got 8 more expeditions because we went all in.
Yeah, we had to. Those are probably played in a different deck. The Tarns were just like cutting.
Yeah. Not sure what's going on there.
We sold the Tarns. We had to sell the Tarns again
to get the other expeditions,
and then we had to get the cheaper ones. That makes sense.
$40 a day, like that old TV show. I don't know. Whatever.
So what are we getting with the fetches? We're getting some shocks. We're balling still.
Well, I certainly don't believe that when fetch lands were created the first time, they were envisioned to be played in this way.
Yeah.
Fetch, shock myself, fetch, shock myself, fetch, shock myself. It's just like weird and bizarre.
Yeah, why are you doing that?
Like you can play 4 of these, and then you can play 10 planes and 10 island in your casual deck or whatever, and have a great time. You can get, your double blue spell or your double white spell on turn 3, and you're going to be so happy about it.
Yeah.
No, it's going to get a dual land and deal you 3 damage every single time. Yep, welcome to real
That's where
Magic.
we've come.
But yeah.
So we've got 2 Blood Crypt, 2 Watery Grave, 1 Steam Vents. You mentioned also earlier that Watery Grave is going to be the land you want to get turn 1. The red is for the splash, and between Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Sub-Denial, Thought Scour, Serum Visions, Death Shadow, Fatal Push, all of these 1-mana cards, Watery Grave seems very very important.
Watery Grave's the single best land. If you can only have 1 land, it's going to be Watery Grave the vast majority of the time. You don't have enough lightning bolts to need to reliably cast them early. Kolaghan's Command's a late game card, and like most of the time that you play 2 spells in 1 turn, it'll be a blue spell and a black spell, or a black spell and a black spell. So like you'll see people lead on like Watery Grave Blood Crypt a lot, or Water Grave depending. It's like having the red is nice for later, but like most of your early interaction is black and blue.
Gotcha.
So like Watery Grave is 100% the best land in your deck. The second Blood Crypt is nice for sideboard cards. You might be trying to keep up Bolt and K Command in the same turn, or like you need to cast other things. You need to fetch an island at some point. Then you might get the second Blood Crypt.
Okay.
But
so,
yeah, Steam Vents is much worse in this deck than it is in general Grixis decks. As you can see, those decks play 2 to 3 copies. My old Grixis Delver deck played 2 to 3 copies. And this deck only plays 1, and it's a trap to fetch it a lot of the time.
Yeah, like you said, you'll get it at some points, but the red is just you don't need a lot of sources for the red. It's very small. And then we got 2 basics to finish off.
You might even see basic Swamp fetched before Steam Vents a lot of the time. Or basic Swamp fetched before basic Island.
I could see that a lot, especially after game 1.
Yeah, Brad said that he thought that you should have it so that almost all your mana taps for black most of the time. Like the first 3 lands should all tap for black, and then later on you can start to get like islands and stuff and Steam Vents.
Okay.
But you are just fetching and shocking yourself a lot because that's how the deck plays.
Yeah.
So it's okay to get different lands. But yeah, the basic island, basic swamp, both to make it so you don't lose exactly too much life, give you some value against Blood Moon, and like
Fulminator Mage.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get locked out. We've seen between the mirrors people playing Fulminator Mage with Kolaghan's Command and Liliana of the Last Hope, being able to pick a couple lands off. We're talking about a deck that only has 19 land. So between like Thought Scours and Serum Visions, you have a little card draw there.
Certainly.
But with only running 7 lands you can actually get to, if you by accident Thought Scour a couple of them, it can be a problem.
Also, one card that 100% guaranteed, provided that you don't counter it, kills all of your threats is Path to Exile.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have 2 lands to get
to be able to get
Path to Exile. I could see a
very good point.
Third basic at some point, but probably not needed. I think the deck functions fine as is. You generally don't want to fetch the basics early unless your life total's under a lot of pressure. And the decks that play Path to Exile, aside from like the other Death Shadow deck that does, generally aren't putting you under a ton of pressure and having Path.
Yes.
So like it's relatively unlikely that you're going to need to get Swamp, get Island, and then get Path and not have anything. Like, this is not the way that the games work out.
Yeah, it's really weird because those decks, like you said, are not putting you under a tremendous amount of pressure. And so they're almost, biting the hand that feeds them by giving you an additional land, because this deck, like, really wants more lands for Snapcaster and
does things
Command
with
anyway.
Its mana, yeah.
So, and Tassiger. So it's like, okay, you dealt with the threat, but instead of being a card for card, you're almost gaining, like, a card and a half because you're getting a land and you're getting the the fast mana.
It's like your Angler gets Path, and then you just have enough mana to activate the second Delve spell, which was a Tassiger. It's just crazy. Super lucky. Great, but yeah.
All right.
Moving to the board.
Let's get to the board. Here we go. All right. Well, we've got some more blue spells.
Some more Stubborn Denials. Pretty obvious when those are good. When you like to draw the 2 that are in your main deck, you're probably going to want them ones in your sideboard.
Yeah. Ceremonious Rejection.
You don't want to get too far behind against something like Collected Company deck where they can just play the creatures out. So I'm a little hesitant to have 4, although you're probably just still supposed to.
Okay.
But not 100% sure. But Ceremonious Rejection is one of the biggest upgrades that we saw the decks truly crushing. This deck used to play Fulminator Mage to beat the Tron type decks, the Eldrazi type decks, and then they made this switch. And I think that the Eldrazi Tron deck doesn't have, and even the Band Eldrazi deck too, don't really have enough time to like search out their cavern. Like the Tron deck can Expedition map it, and the Band Eldrazi deck plays more and has Ancient Stirrings as well. So it's a little easier for them to find it, but if they don't have it, taking the time off to find it can give them or can punish them because you have these huge early threats.
Yeah.
So like all those things said, rejection gets much better because people just kind of have to play their spells into you for fear of dying to your board.
Yeah, and it works really nice with Snapcaster. Also being a card that is good versus Affinity. This deck has a lot of cards for Affinity, but Affinity is just always one of the best decks. So having another card for that matchup that just literally says counter any spell for 1 blue.
Well, the
is
general,
just phenomenal.
The original Grixis decks were very good against Affinity because they played multiple copies of Spell Snare.
Yeah,
From
Spell
Delver
Snare.
to Control, what have you, played lots of Spell Snares, and like you can't really play that card in this deck. So that said, you're going to play some rejections, and they can take that spot, hit the plating on the draw, allow you to parry back into the game, by double spelling later on and stuff.
I'm glad you brought up Spell Snare because it's a deck that originally I thought, it's a card originally that I thought would be very good in this deck. And I think the consideration is like you can only play like Stubborn Denials or one, you can't really play them both, which I understand. But the way this deck was designed, it also plays very good versus Spell Snare. Like, you would think, like, okay, yeah, Spell Snare, yeah, we want it versus Snapcaster. But no, it, like, only hits Snapcaster. And it hits Terminate. It doesn't hit any of the threats as the other, you know, I want to say Jun, Grixis, Abzan decks that have, like, the Goyfs or the Bobs, or other,
Scavengers, Grim Flayer.
Yeah, all those type of cards where it's good.
You also don't care about those cards because all your creatures are just bigger than them, a lot of them.
Yeah. You're a little scared about Dark Confident.
You don't like Snapcaster Mage. You certainly don't want to get Snapcaster Mage to cast against you a bunch of times.
Yeah, that's true.
But
we went into Kolaghan's Command a lot, so we just got one more. It's just that good, and versus some matchups, like you said, you want to morph into a different deck, and then you want 3 copies.
Well, the deck just slows down a lot in post-board games as like people are boarding in more ways to deal with you. They might try to like interact with your graveyard. You need to board in more reactive spells to keep pace with what they're doing.
Sure.
And as a result of that, like the game slows down, and you just have a 3-mana spell that you're going to have more time to cast.
Okay.
And like that's just the way it works post-board a lot. And because of that, like I like the 3rd K command. It's possible that in a perfect world this deck plays 3 main deck because they really like the effect. All 4 modes do something relevant a lot of the time. And like you just don't really have enough room or enough time in game 1 in a fast format like Modern to have 3 mopey 3-mana cards in your deck.
Yeah, that's the main problem, I think. And not only, we talked about the dream scenarios of casting the Delve creatures early, but there's going to be times where you're going to cast it with a mana up, or you're going to cast it on turn 3, because that's what it takes to cast it. So
you're boarding it in like a lot, though. Like you might even board it against every deck. You don't even know. It depends. But yep.
All right, on to another card that we want versus the grindier matchups. We got Liliana.
3 different cards, 2 of which just, I guess 3 technically. K Return 2 is solid against it. Just obliterate and crush Lingering Souls, which is a card that usually beats the heck out of Grixis.
Yep.
Historically speaking. But Staticaster helps with Lingering Souls, is good against the company decks. Awesome card to have there. Super random interaction where Brad Nelson was playing in the open and he cast his Snapcaster Mage, gave Kolaghan's Command flashback, and then before he cast Kolaghan's Command, he Staticastered his Snapcaster Mage, cast Kolaghan's Command to do something and return the Snapcaster Mage that he just killed because he had another Kolaghan's Command in the graveyard for later. So he just made some little cool trick of time
that's
and got to do that. But Staticaster does a lot. It's got flash. It's sweet with all the instant speed tricks you have in your deck, so no one really knows you have it. The Kolaghan's Commands that they know are in your deck disguise your Staticaster well because it looks like you're leaving up the same thing.
Sure.
You actually just want to Staticaster them or K return them, and they think you have K command.
Okay.
It's pretty sweet. Liliana the Last Hope is very good against the other Death Shadow decks. Gets back Death Shadows or Snapcaster Mages going long, kills Lingering Souls, makes it a little harder for them to pressure you with their Delve creatures, and then is good against something like Tarmogoyf where it gets shrunk to a manageable level or whatever. And then also very good against the small creature decks. Like the company decks, Affinity, all those things. Solid card there.
Yeah, I like Liliana a lot in this deck. Being able to get back your threats, it's something where it's like green has Traverse the Luminal to make sure that they don't flood out on like the spells and not the threats. Lily allows you to get back those threats that haven't been Path of Exiled. And it just seems like a card you want in your deck when you're playing Thought Scour.
Super good with Thought Scour.
Yeah.
As your threats that you didn't actually lose over the course of the game, you can get back to.
Yeah.
Like it didn't really cost you anything. You didn't have to play those and have them die to get them into the graveyard. You just get them back from, cantripping and just moving along naturally. So the card can be really smooth in that regard.
True.
And it's a lot of times when if you're not pressuring them with the Death Shadow and they're not pressuring you with the Death Shadow, you might have some Delve creatures that are looking at each other and just play something like this, and it just takes over the game.
Yeah.
The value spirals out of
There's just
control.
so many flexible cards in this deck. We talked about Kolaghan's Command. Lily's another one. And one of the most flexible cards in sideboards these days for black decks is Collective Brutality.
Yes, it does a lot of different things. Great against burn, which can pressure your life total, which you're already hurting a lot, obviously. Yeah. It's good against the combo decks, as it's another discard spell with some added utility of fueling Delve. You might, against decks where like it's important to have discard spells, you might have to trim on something to bring this card in. One of the cards that does get trimmed sometimes from Grixis decks, historically speaking, is Thought Scour. And so Collective Brutality allows you to still fuel Delve while trimming a Thought Scour. I don't encourage trimming too many because your deck is still supposed to operate the way it's supposed to operate, which is by cantripping and doing a lot of things with the graveyard. But if they're bringing in graveyard hate, like Ley Lines or something like that, or Rest in Peace, and you don't really have time to use your Thought Scours, you might do this because the discard doesn't matter anymore, but you're going to be able to just get something out of your extra cards. Like you can ditch your excess cards and get multiple cards off of one card. So Brutality, lot of uses, pretty versatile. And then the next two cards on the slide are Graveyard Hate.
Yeah, we've got Surgical Extraction and the Spell Bomb. We've got one super fast, very you want to kind of like hide it.
We've got two pieces of Graveyard Hate, two copies of each piece, and they're extremely polarized. Yeah. One is Surgical Extraction, which is the get 'em all in combo deck Graveyard Hate, where you exile their Past in Flames or whatever after they gifts for it, or you
Goryo's Vengeance.
Yeah, you get their Grizzlebrand when they try to reanimate it, or you get their prize or their Narcomoebas or Blood Gas for their prize amalgams, something like that. Whereas Nile Spellbomb is the opposite. It's just super in the middle. It replaces itself. You can play it in fair matchups. It makes their Snapcasters worse. It makes their Traverses worse. It makes their Goyfs worse. Can get their Delve creatures once in a while.
Yeah, and especially in decks that are like very redundant, it takes out that one card that like the deck kind of needs, like the backbone of their deck, which I like a lot. Whereas, we're talking about the Spell Bomb, putting an artifact in the deck is fine. It's 1 mana. You can't play Cage on, unfortunately, with playing Snapcaster Mage. But being able to just exile one person's graveyard, especially in, I don't know if Brad brought them in the mirrors. I'm not really sure, but I would like to think that it has a place there.
I'd imagine he brought in Spellbomb and didn't bring in Surgical.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, because the bomb replaces itself, but also takes the mirror, takes away Snapcaster Mage, takes away early Delve. Just all in all, just like a grind card, just like K-Command.
Did you run out of things to say and then look at the Surgical Extraction art and go, take out the backbone of their deck because he's taking out the backbone on the art?
No, but
I realized that a second after you said
that.
I'm like,
that's pretty good.
All right.
It's just in decks with like Tarmogoyf and decks with like Death Shadow. If you take all of their Death Shadows and then they loot, like if you're playing the Sultai version, and then you next turn Snapcaster the Goyf that was in the yard, it's going to be very tough for them to win, and they only have so many threats.
Except you cast Surgical Extraction twice instead of doing something relevant.
Yeah, but I mean that is something relevant.
You're just not supposed to do that. This is like Surgical Extraction is the one card that like gets sideboarded in incorrectly more than any other card.
Okay.
That's just how it is. It's a card that people are like, oh, I can take out all 4 copies of Collected Company. How am I going to win if they draw 3 Collected Companies?
Well, Collected Company is different. We're talking about a deck that's based off of Kolaghan's Command, Liliana, which is redundantly getting back these threats, and you don't have a way to exile them other than this card. And it also lowers your life total, which is what you want to do.
For sake of the product that we're giving, which is a deck tech, I'm not going to argue with you about this for 40 minutes.
Sure.
But I could, and you're wrong. But we'll move on.
We'll talk about that in the final
thoughts. So I got a baseball glove in my life. So softball got rained out today. Life's hard.
Steak's great. I had a nice one in Omaha.
GP Vegas is going to be sweet.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Final thoughts with the deck. Why is it not playing the baubles?
Because you don't have Traverse in your deck.
Okay, but it doesn't have Traverse, doesn't have Goyf, but don't you think it could be, it's a 0 mana, put a card in the graveyard.
Your bauble is Thought Scour.
Yeah, but okay, I'm just food for thought here.
Well, that's the answer. They're not
just flat. You just can't run bauble and Thought Scour.
Well,
you can't fuel the graveyard.
You
even
just
more?
don't need that many slots to do that, and Thought Scour does it just as well because of the Delve creatures.
But it costs 1 mana too. That's got to be some kind of consideration.
I don't know. I feel like the non-blue versions kind of play more like combo decks, whereas the blue versions play more like tempo decks. So I think that the instant speed spell is a little bit better than the random 52 card deck card or whatever you want to call it.
That makes
also,
sense.
it really matters. You don't have Delirium and you don't have Tarmogoyf. Those are 2 reasons why Ball is good.
Okay.
So I think that that's probably it.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's Deck of the Week with Grixis Shadow. I think it's a very good deck, and we're going to see some more iterations getting ready for Vegas online, and hopefully we're going to see probably one in the top 8.
We thank you all for watching, and next week we're going to have another one. We think it's going to be a Legacy deck. It might be a special day and time because we're all going to Vegas.
Yeah.
And by all, I mean you and me and Ed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stay tuned next week. I think we're going to do a Legacy deck ahead of the GP, and thank you guys for watching.
All right, later.
The fighters are ready! Daddy is ready! The refs are ready! Are you ready?
Draft Exemplar on turn 2, attack you for 7.
Whoa.
We'll see
Have
you
a
next
good one,
week.
guys. Thank
12:30. We'll be back and better than ever. Oh, I'm doing a dab.